Good morning. Good morning. I think we'll make a start this morning. If you can just take your seats. Thank you. So good morning again, and welcome to our last morning of the Convention Lecture Program. Today's topic will be celebrating the use of roses now and in the future and around the world. And I'd like to now introduce our first presenter, Rose Kentish. Her title is Using Roses in Beverages. Please welcome Rose.
Good morning. My name is Rose Kentish, and I'm really excited to speak to you about what I'm learning about roses in beverages. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge this land that we meet on today is the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Adelaide region, and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. I've always had a love of making, with a particular focus on aroma and flavour. I grew up on a farm with cattle, sheep, potatoes and pasture crops. They were at the heart of what we grew. But actually, as a child, my strongest memories are the two gardens in which we played and worked. My own family's garden on a couple of acres down a narrow bitumen road in Mingbull in the southeast of South Australia. And the garden of my grandparents about 1 kilometre up that same road. They were full of fruit trees, roses, lavender and productive veggie patches. And as children, we were actively involved in the preparation, weeding, harvesting and cooking from both of these two gardens. It was a great start to understanding the full circle of the seasons and produce that grew well on our land. 10 years on, and at the age of 26, I was now married and with the first of 4 children in my arms. And my husband Sam proposed the idea to me that I should become a winemaker. Actually, it was a bigger idea of becoming makers and grape growers, the terms known as being vignerons. But how could we do this? We didn't grow up on these types of farms. But there was an old vineyard in McLaren Vale that Sam's parents and grandmother had planted in 1969 called Ullathorne. It was for sale, and we were young and probably just crazy enough to buy it. We worked that land, and I made wine from that vineyard for 15 years. And then a dream struck me to move us all to the south of France so that I could begin a different making adventure in Provence and down on the island of Corsica. And it was actually while doing vintage in Corsica that I first learnt to distill. The vignerons that I worked with on Corsica had an old alembic copper still with no bells and whistles, nothing like the stills of today. And so on the simplest of stills, I learnt to take cuts. That is, to pull alcohol through a still at high temperature, keeping only the heart of the distillation. The heart is the section of the distillation that tastes most pure and most sweet. As I said, unlike the stills I work on today, this still had no bells and whistles, just a temperature gauge and a spirit outlet, so that you could taste it and determine when the hearts began and when they finished. The heart of the distillation run is the spirit that you want to keep as eau de vie, which is the neutral spirit in which becomes the basis of your vodka, gin or liqueur. And little did I realise that this experience over 12 years ago on Corsica would give me the skills and some confidence to find a deeply creative solution to a major problem that I was experiencing in March 2020, in the early days of COVID. Because I also run a beverage company called Spark, and some of you who are South Australian may know of this company, or if you're regular visitors to Adelaide. The problem we were in is that in late 2019, we'd brewed $375,000 worth of apple cider, ginger beer, hard lemonade, and pale ale, and most of it was in kegs. We were getting ready to launch our brews up the east coast of Australia. And then all the pubs and restaurants around Australia closed their doors, and our fresh brews were starting to age in keg. You have to think of these brews a bit like fresh bread of the alcohol industry. They need to be drunk young and fresh. We were in trouble. I decided to order a little copper alembic still from Europe, a little baby version of the still I'd worked on in Corsica. That's with my daughter. So about 8 weeks later, a little 5-litre still arrived in the post, and I began to distill small amounts of these brewed products to see how they tasted as spirits. And just as an aside, some of you may know, if you're a fan of apple brandy, especially the things that are made such as Calvados, that they are made by at first brewing an apple cider and then distilling it into an eau de vie and then aging it in barrel to become a brandy. So the process of doing that is not new, but actually taking non-traditional things like hard lemonade, ginger beer and distilling those is quite a new concept. So I wanted to think how I could turn these aging brews into drink now spirits and liqueurs and sell them online and through bottle shops, which was all that was open in 2020. It was a possible way for our business to survive, but it had lots of cost and risk. As a company, we'd always intended to launch a spirit range, and our response to the world pandemic was through adaptation and deep innovation. We turned the problem in front of us, the aging brews, into a new brand called Full Circle Spirits, and we started to create a new range. And so Full Circle Spirits was born. Full Circle is a bit like a big sister to Spark. It holds values of all natural, sustainable, and sophisticated flavour at its core. The range of spirits and liqueurs we have created are driven from the local South Australian botanicals growing in the land around us, the oils in the air, the herbs we use to flavour our food. We often collect from family and friends' gardens or forage in nature. The featured botanicals are local, and so it really is a true expression of South Australia and the terroir, which is a winemaking term for the expression of the land, the food, the culture, the aspect, the elevation. It is taking that whole concept and expressing it through spirits and liqueurs. However, I wanted to take my understanding of flavour and aroma to a higher or a deeper level. So, as if it wasn't enough to get this company through COVID, in 2020 through to the end of last year, I undertook perfumery studies online in live tutorials and making sessions through the night out of Grasse in the south of France. As a winemaker, I'd always thought a lot about aroma, and this had extended into the Spark brews and the early Full Circle spirits that I'd created. But I was really fascinated to extend that idea of scent and taste by revealing aroma and flavour layers, using some terminology found more commonly in the perfume world. That terminology and way of thinking about scent and flavour is, and you would have heard these terms, top note, heart note, base note. Essentially, top notes are more phenolic, meaning they're bright and fast to reach you, but then they can subside just as quickly. And you know that feeling as someone's walking towards you, you can often smell them first, and then they pass. You get the heart of the spirit as they're passing, and then long after they've gone or left the room, that bass note is still hovering in the air. So I started to think a lot about what we grow well here in South Australia, and that brought me to roses. Of course, I could learn about aroma and flavour of roses. I could turn my attention to creating delicious beverages by capturing the flavour and aroma of roses. I started by walking through some of Adelaide's public gardens, such as the Veal Garden on South Terrace in Adelaide CBD. And I was also invited into some beautiful private gardens as well. I was quick to discover that not all roses bring high levels of aroma, and therefore flavour. The two things are deeply connected. And so, with many a trial and error, trying to capture the more phenolic roses, and therefore their oils, I've been able to create some spirits and liqueurs that have caught some attention of spirit and liqueur lovers. And I want to talk about two examples of these. Before I do, these are some of the roses that I've played with, and also moving from a copper still to a glass still, which is more of a delicate approach and very akin to perfumery. It's been hand-blown. So the first of the two examples that I've made is a wild rose liqueur. So I've made it from distilled rose petals, fresh petals, but I've also added honey from the bees that have fed on these roses. And so it's a true full circle of life kind of experience. And the aroma and taste, I thought 8:30 might be too early for a tasting with you, so I'll describe it. Well, I'm open if you're open. First, you will find the aroma of fresh rose petals, a little like a fresh artisanal Turkish delight. And then on the palate, an underlying honey sweetness, obviously from the honey. But then finishing with like fresh buttered toast. And that's because I aged the spirit in old French oak barrels. Like the sound of that? Ah, I got them the wrong way around. That's the rose liqueur. And this is the other one I made, which is a plum and hibiscus gin, which with its name doesn't sound like it would be much about roses, but you'll soon discover it's very much about roses. It's made from Davidson or Ure plums, which are the Ghana people's plums, blood plums from my parents' tree. But then I supported it with floral top notes from hibiscus flowers, rose petals, lavender. And so it actually tastes like a Mediterranean dessert. You might know the type of desserts I'm referring to, which are not particularly sweet, but they are all about stone fruit, rose water, and almost like a sprinkling of icing sugar. I make these in really tiny batches, maybe 100, 150 bottles at a time. And so they're pretty special and pretty unique, and they vary with the seasons. When you first walked in, we handed you a little flyer, and we've got about 90 bottles remaining of both these spirits, and so we've created a special offer for the participants. If you'd love to taste these, you're welcome to purchase, and either myself or my mum are happy to take your forms if you'd like to take some home. They make beautiful gifts or just a beautiful treat for yourself. So what's next? There is still so much more to learn. A lot of more experimentation with different types of roses. A lot more experimentation with where the roses and the rose petals sit within the still, because I've done some experiments where they're in the pot or the belly of the still, some experiments where I'm putting them up in the basket, which is then you're using a vapour extraction of the oils, and sometimes when it's both, so that you get different flavours coming through. I'm expanding the idea of the rose accord, and the rose accord is a perfume technology which looks at how you create the scent of a rose, and that's a very general concept, with about 10 different botanicals, so that you can then use that in perfumery, but you can also use the rose accord as an idea in beverages. So I'm really interested in extracting that idea of the rose accord in perfume and seeing how I can create that in botanicals in spirit. I've played around a little bit with dried rose petals, dried rose buds, fresh rose petals, fresh rose buds, and as I said, where they sit within the still in order to get different flavours and aromas, and there's still a lot of work to be done. And then there's perfume, the pure art of scent. And that might just be where I end up. But for now, my learning is through roses in beverages. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rose. Obviously, we've all had very challenging times, but when you've got all those barrels, it would be even more challenging. So thank you for coming today, and here's a little gift from us. Thank you very much.
Beautiful. Thank you.
And you are. Yeah. And Rose will stay around if you've got any more questions just before morning tea. Thank you. Now, our next presenter, I'd like to introduce you to Thomas Proll, and we thank Thomas for being with us here in Australia. His topic today is New Rose Styles, Unusual Rose Blooms for the Future. So please welcome Thomas. I know he's here. Thanks, Melanie. Yeah, we'll just be a few minutes, so chat amongst yourselves. Okay, so please welcome Thomas. Sorry, we're running a little early.
Yeah.
So you've got plenty of time.
Good.
Yeah, yes. Your clicker and water.
Okay, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Hope you had a good rest. Yeah, so let's start with a topic you all know from the program that I have to say I didn't choose myself. It was given. I never found out who actually came up with that idea, but I hope what I present to you now will at least halfway meet what that person thought about this title. And when I started thinking, when I got the topic, I started wondering myself what actually means unusual. So I looked up for definition. And this is what you find in dictionaries. It's It's different from what is usual or expected, and I like this one even better. Different from others of the same type in a way that is surprising, interesting, or attractive. Sounds pretty good. So, but considering that all variation of genetics of the genus Rosa, human beings have reorganized you. We breeders, we are mixing genetics all the time. Over the last couple of centuries are just borrowed from Mother Nature. We should maybe start this journey from her point of view. So I chose, just as an example, a wild rose, a species, Rosa multiflora, you're all familiar with. So this is what Mother Nature thought a rose should look like. So all other roses we are admiring in our gardens and parks are actually unusual. This is usual, you know. So, but with creating modern roses during the 20th century, the hybrid tea flower shape became more and more a common idea, almost a cliché or a stereotype of a rose for most people. So if you would ask average people today, they would probably describe a red hybrid tea as a typical rose. Very interesting. I remember a rose nursery having 800 varieties, and they had a school out day once. The very young kids, they went for open flowers, single flower, where you could see the petals. And only the older kids, they described hybrid tea roses. So there must be a kind of a learning curve. So the younger children found the more natural types actually more interesting. And that all went on, at least for the earlier decades of the last century until the late 80s, but I will come to that point back later. So do you want a proof for the popularity of the hybrid tea rose? So for that, let's have a look on the front pages of the Cordes catalogs during the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. So this is the rose catalogs of the 1950s. I'm pretty sure some of those roses will make the exhibitors in the room wet dreams. You find, for example, I think it's in 57 that might be Cordes perfecta that I still saw on the show benches here. I hardly see that rose ever in my life. And there's some more. But you can see all 10 catalogs have a hybrid tea on the front page. And let's move on to the 60s. Absolutely the same, and many of them a red hybrid tea. So this is what the mass market actually wanted, and that was the typical type of a rose. And we have another decade. This is the 1970s, and again, all HTs. Is it all HTs? Yeah? Have a close look. There's just one other one hiding. There's one floribunda hiding. Even it is presented pretty much like a hybrid tea, and that's here in 1973. And some of you might have a guess what it is. It's a rose called Frisia, in originally Corasia. The denomination is used in England. Our friends from the US know this rose as Sunsprite. Also one of those we have a little love-hate relationship with. Because it's a legend, probably one of those behind Iceberg that is most well known as a Cordes rose, but it's getting too much black spot for our climate in the meantime. Even is popular for a little fragrance, but it's not a rose that I would recommend anymore these days for the gardens. But anyway, you could see almost every rose in 30 years on the front page was a hybrid tea. So nowadays, some decades later, hybrid teas are not completely out of fashion, but have definitely lost the pole position in popularity. I know that some of you might regret that, who are into exhibiting and are really keen on hybrid teas, but that is a fact, at least what I can tell you about our German market. But be assured, we have a wide breeding program, and if we find something nice, it will still end up in our assortment. And the hybrid tea, the newer hybrid tea roses with a typical hybrid tea shape, we have put together in our Eleganza collection that also Treloar Roses has released here in, here in Australia. So this is some of the roses you will find here. Athena, for example, or Grande Amore, that is also known in the UK as my Valentine. And I just saw Gavin in the audience. You still owe me a drink for winning the grand award in the Expo Rose Show with Grande Amore. Proll is another one with huge flowers. A gentleman from France once told me he measured 23 centimeters of a flower. That's probably the largest I've ever heard. And Buxom Beauty is a name people know this rose in, for example, in England. Beverly is another one we saw in the botanical garden, known as Perfume Passion here in Australia, but known as Beverly in the US, for example. And I just saw Diane arriving, and we just received the Alexander Gamble Award by the American Rose Society for fragrance for this rose. Very well appreciated. And Sunny Sky I saw in some places here in the botanical garden. Wedding bells we saw in yesterday in Kelvin's garden, with a little trouble opening in this wet weather, but also Sunny Sky, Winter Sun I've seen in a couple of places here performing really nicely. This is a brand new one coming into the Eleganza assortment in Germany called Better Times. We had that name in mind during the pandemic because when we all were trapped in the lockdown, we found that would be a good name. But now with all the troublesome situation in Europe, you know, with having a terrible war so close by, it became actually an even deeper meaning. In the center we see, this was at the German Rose Convention of the Insel Mainau, in the Lake Constance. That's will be part of the post tour, I guess, during the Brussels convention. And the photo on the very right is a bed that won the public award in the Hague trials last year, actually this summer in the Hague. Yes, and only the arrival of the Austin roses during the mid-'80s on the German market, but I think it was pretty much the same in other countries as well, changed focus from classic HTs to what we call a nostalgic flower shape these days. And also, I think it's worth to mention, it was accompanied by a strong renaissance of the heritage roses. You know, people, being no Rosarians like us, they always mix up Austin roses with old roses. But anyway, it's our job to tell them what's the difference. So we definitely owe David Austin a lot for this change, and this has definitely widened our type of roses, and that happened pretty much during the 80s, but it needed some time to have other rose breeders understanding that the demand for this, what they probably thought was an unusual shape, it was sometimes just called the old grandma roses, you know, who wants that? The people want hybrid teas, come on. That trend will be over in 1 or 2 years, but they were wrong. So it wasn't a short-term trend, but it was permanent. And so they had to adapt their breeding efforts, and unusual became usual after a while. So you can see it took Cordis a little while, but the first really absolutely nostalgic shaped rose, a grandiflora, was released in 97, Sebastian Kneipp in Germany, but it was called here in Australia. It was on the market as Amaretto, and our friends in the UK know it as Fragrant Memories. And another 3 years later, the rose also was put on the cover of the catalog. So that was a big change and something new then. And we always called the collection we started back then, the fairy tale roses, we like to call them our answer to the English roses. And we have just a couple of here, for example, that are on the Australian market. One is Märchenzauber in Germany. Markus is in the audience. He remembers it became a golden rose of Baden-Baden a couple of years ago, called Fairy Tale Magic here. Road caption is called Red Riding Hood, the English translation. The Jubilee Rose for Sangerhausen for the 100th Jubilee, released in 2003, is known as Afternoon Delight. Pomponella has the same name all over the world. And a rose that has never been released in Europe, by the way, was first released in South Africa by Ludwig Taschner under the name of Roy McAllister. But many of you have seen it here, and it's beloved by many for the great performance here. This is coconut ice. There's very nice plants actually in the botanical garden of this rose. Another one that is a quite interesting color combination is Die Sehenswerte in Germany. I don't bother you with explanation of that funny name, but it's known here in Australia as No Surrender. And Calvin, I really very much liked how you treated that rose. That was a bit too vigorous, he said, for the garden, but Calvin has his own method, putting them on pillars, and so he put it up, and I saw the rose doing a great show. And it's a very nice color combination of a purple red with golden yellow reverse, a little like the old Cordis Hypertea Cleopatra that some of you might remember, but with a much better disease resistance. And if we go into the mauve and lavender roses, many of you probably know Novalis, that is also known in the US under the trademark Poseidon. And the last one here on this slide is Wellenspiel in Germany. They call Tallulah here in Australia. But just a few examples of those nostalgic type roses. But soon, nostalgic flower shape could be found in all type of rose categories. So here's an example actually for a ground cover rose called Larissa in Germany. And our friends from New Zealand know this rose as Powder Puff, as it has been released by Bob Matthews over there. And of course, we see nostalgic flower shape in climbers, two of them that are also available here. This is Florentina, and another one highly fragrant, Kiss Me Kate, released the same year when Prince William married Kate Middleton, and all the English newspapers had the slogan Kiss Me Kate after the wedding kiss, and that what inspired us to call a rose Kiss Me Kate. And brand new, actually on the front page of our current wholesale catalog, is a small patio rose, nice compact, very unique terracotta color that is Pompeii. And people call this type of red, kind of orangey terracotta red, Pompeii red, because the wall paintings in the city of Pompeii look like this. So this is the reason for this, the name of this new Lilliput rose. Very nostalgic pom-pom shape. And some of you might like it or not. I can imagine some of you find that terrible, to have even in typical hybrid teas to have that nostalgic flower shape. So, and for that we actually created another group. You know, the typical HT shape we call the Eleganza roses, but the Eleganza Antique, they have a hybrid tea growth habit, but on top they have a nostalgic flower. And this is one that is released in Germany under the name Amorosa, and it is close to be released here in Australia too, and I heard from Proll they are going to call it Bridal Bouquet. Great name too. And some of you who might have walked the second-year trial ground, I know you don't have to know that, so all the judges, please close your ears. You might have seen this rose in the second-year trial at the Botanical. And you might have also seen that one, because that's also sitting in the trials over there. This is a rose called Concorde. And some of you might wonder about the name. If you're familiar with rose history, you might say, oh, this is a name Mayon has released roses under. You're completely right. And we were surprised ourselves that the name was free, because we have been asked by a company building camper vans, under the name Concorde, and we said, oh no, the name is taken. But the name was free, and you all probably can imagine the name is burned forever after the terrible plane crash in France. So no one in France would ever use that name again. So this is not after the Place de Concorde, this is not after the plane, this is named after a brand for camper vans, that you know. But great rose anyway, upright floribunda with nostalgic flowers, or grandiflora with very stiff petals. And the last one in this row is Ti Amo, also a very nice red rose with a typical stiff upright growth, and very firm petals. So all of the three roses here are actually of interest even by commercial cut flower growers, because they can use for cut very nicely. And as an example, I show you the last one. Kind of sad for me, but also makes me proud. This is the funeral of my dad that took place pretty much around the Copenhagen Convention 4 years ago. So that was the reason I could only come briefly to the convention. But as a rose breeder, if you have your last farewell, your goodbye to your dad, and you want to bring a message, you don't want just an anonymous cut flower. Would have been easy. I just have to walk in the cool store at Cordis and grab whatever cut flower. No, I wanted to have one of my babies. Yeah. So I walked out to the field. It was late June, and there she was, 10 or 12 rows, a big block of Ti Amo, and I thought, wow, that's the right rose. So I called my cousin, who is a florist, and asked her if she would do the bouquet for the coffin. And she said, of course I would do. It's her uncle. And she said, do you deliver roses from the grocery market? And no, I said, no. The two of us, we go out to the field and cut the roses. And she had never done that herself as a florist. So she got her shears, and I said, this is the roses. You prune one stem per plant only, so don't butcher the plants. But you are free to cut as many as you want. And she was in heaven, She just walked the rows and cut the roses. She later on made into these beautiful bouquets. And for me, this is a very nice memory. And I think it was a very nice, heartful goodbye to my dad. And another one I would like to show you here is one Cordis actually gifted themselves for our 125th anniversary. This is a rose we called Cordis Jubilee, and I always liked that it had the best of all times. It has a typical modern HT growth habit, but the shape of the blooms was definitely truly nostalgic, so reminding you of old times. Even in the old times, they didn't have yellow roses. So this is a very nice rose. Actually, just very recently released in New Zealand by Bob Matthews, and he called it a piece of cake. Also because the rose has a very, very good disease resistance. By the way, the lady doing the naming of the rose is Marlene. Marlene, we casted her for our anniversary year back then to be the Rose Queen representing Cordis. She named a number of roses. She was just sweet 17 back then, so it's a couple of years ago. The last I heard that after school, she went to work and travel to Australia. So I haven't heard from her since. So if you might have kept her, I understand why. So. Anyway, with more and more roses of nostalgic flower shape and shape in all types, the common idea might have widened, but the focus and popularity in public was still on double flowers. It always needed to be double flowers. Those were usual roses for most people. Single-petaled roses were not popular at all on the mass market. Always with some rosarians, but not on the mass market, and probably by many people considered to be unusual. Unfortunately, it needed badly declining insect populations all over Europe, and I actually hear the same from other countries like Australia and New Zealand. Recognized and widely discussed in public, causing a strong trend for what we call natural gardening, in general, and the use of insect and bee-friendly plants specifically. Also leading the focus on single or very slightly double rose blooms. Let's call that trend back to nature. And there we are, meeting up with Mother Nature again and her idea of roses. Surprised? Yes, we were surprised by the sudden interest in insect-friendly single-petaled roses. We still didn't have to breed them, but just bundle them. They were already in the assortment, they were in the catalog. We had to bundle them in a new collection for marketing that we called Nectar Garden. And I know there are probably beekeepers, professional or hobby beekeepers in the room, at least Sven is somewhere, so I know that. I apologize, yes, we know roses have mainly pollen and no nectar, but we found the name pretty great, so anyway. Yeah, and once more, the unusual became usual quickly. So this is the Nectar Garden assortment, very, very popular in the meantime in Germany and all over Europe. So this became almost our #1 group within a year or two. So you could hardly catch up with production. This was roses produced in small numbers only because hardly anyone bought them, and suddenly, almost overnight, they became very, very popular. They are just about to start with a collection here. They are a little behind, but they are about to start at Proll with this collection here in Australia too. So Alexander von Humboldt is a very popular one that is on the market here. Is Eskimo in Europe, but it's called Silver Ghost in Australia and the UK. But we actually took it out of the group already again, because in the beginning we were pretty naive, I have to say. We thought every single petaled rose should be attractive for insects and bees. And then you need photos. You need photos of the roses with bees and insects. So you go out, and we had a long hedge in our display garden of Eskimo, Silver Ghost. And you're standing there with your camera, and the whole garden is buzzing like crazy, and the bees are everywhere. And you watch that rose, just nothing. Sometimes someone comes to visit, but just for a second and disappears right away. So this rose isn't attractive for insects at all. They come to visit shortly, and then they find out, no, nothing to get. And then I remembered from the breeding house that I was trying to breed with this rose years back. And you could collect the stamens, but when you put them in the glass, you know, we learned that the other day, and you were shaking it, there was no pollen in. And so what takes us human beings a while to find out, the bees probably find out right away. So anyway, this rose is actually not worth the Nectar Garden collection. Anyway, we have more. We have Juanita. We have Lemon Fizz that's very popular in the US because it keeps the color very well. And we have Summer of Love that some of you might have spotted as well, because it's a rose easy to spot in the second-year trial in the botanical. The name Summer of Love is already taken for another rose here in Australia, so it might be renamed, but it will be on the market soon under a different name. Okay. And a somehow related topic is another one, and I have to say, like numerous others presently active colleagues, I have to admit I'm absolutely no pioneer breeding so-called Persica hybrids, but I'm benefiting from efforts some other gentlemen have put into this special type of rose in the past. And I can't name them all, but three I would like to name as an example. We all know that Jack Harkness already back in the 1970s started to breed with Persica hybrids. Actually, he started breeding with a species rose, and he did a lot of work we all benefit from today. And another one is Peter Ilsing with the Babylon Ice roses you might have heard of from the Netherlands. And of course, my fatherly friend Chris Warner brought a lot of disease resistance into the Persicas, and you've seen a lot of his creations in the botanical now, and he's still creating on this rose group. He's into climbers now and all other types, you know. So I definitely owe those gentlemen a lot of respect. But our roses, because all the good names have an I in the name, they are probably all taken. So we ended up with the idea to create the CU collection. And this was the first CU rose we released only 4 years ago in 2018. I think I started to play around almost 10 years earlier with this type of rose. CU in purple is kind of special. It has pretty good, healthy, glossy foliage, which is quite different to some other Persica hybrids. It's not thornless, but it has pretty low number of thorns. And if you know the background of Rosa Persica or Huthemia Persica, it's a plant growing in the desert normally. And as a desert plant, there isn't much to eat in a desert, so you don't want to be eaten as a plant. So that thing is thorny, as you can only imagine. And this rose is, it's not thornless, but it has really a low number of thorns. And many Persica hybrids are dropping petals pretty early. And in commerce and garden centers, that's not popular at all. So you can see the photo on the right hand. This is taken in the Hague trials. It's a bed of 80 plants of one variety. And you can see the first flush, how long the petals stay on and keep on the plant. And this is pretty special for a Persica hybrid, actually. This is the range, how it continued. You see CU in pink, that was awarded a silver medal 2 nights ago at the trials here. And it's a pretty vigorous, almost a shrub here. For us in Germany, it's growing a little lower. We would still call it a floribunda. Same year, we released CU in red. And 2 years later, that's also a variety already around here, is CU in rosé, which has a white reverse, which gives it another special look. And one to come with a great color. I'm looking forward to be released in 2 years from now in 2024 will be CU in apricot. So it's already in propagation, and we are building it up next summer for sales a little later. Yeah, and a really funny rose, maybe a little, breeding accident, I could always say. Sometimes we also need a little luck. This is a rose I actually got from breeding ramblers with Persica, but somehow this rose stayed pretty short. It's actually a balcony box, what you see on that photo. And this rose easily grows by cuttings, so you can put it in those balcony boxes, and it stays very, very compact, but it's very floriferous, and it's a really nice rose. And because it works so well in containers and balcony boxes, we called her CU in a box. And it's quite popular already, and we'll see where it goes. Funny rose. Yes, and of course you can breed Persicas into almost everything. And those of you who have been to the rose convention in the regional convention in Uruguay might remember that my dear colleague Jim Proll from California gave a talk. And at the end of his talk, he gave an outlook, what to come in the future. And he said, just before leaving, his 15-year-old daughter told him, "Dad, why don't you cross a Persica with a striped rose? So we could get a striped Persica. That would be cool, Dad." And this rose was already existing, so I had to take Jim by side later on and said, "Sorry, Jim, it's done." We have not released it. It's getting a little too much black spot for us in Germany. But our friends in the US at our agency Star Roses, they are definitely interested. And in a little drier, hotter climate, it might work well. But it's definitely something I will continue to breed striped roses and Persicas. It gives a very nice combination, as you can see from this example. I also bred this rose with Persica, actually. That leads me over to striped roses. I have some really nice offsprings of this rose with Persica, so you just need to add the dark red eye to this type of rose. It's a rose bred, of course, a couple of years ago. It has just been pre-released this summer as the Marburg 800 rose. Marburg is a city a little north of Frankfurt. It's a university town, So a lot of young spirit, a lot of ecological awareness, so people growing organic. And so for the anniversary, the city asked for something hip and special, but still great disease resistance, also something you could plant into public spaces. And I had to think a little, and I ended up with this rose, and it was a great success, actually releasing it already in this year. And it's a bulletproof, healthy rose. It has open flowers and that very fine, nice striping. And I discussed with Hayden a lot about this breeding line yesterday, actually. And it goes back to a McGrady rose that is, I think, not on the market here in Australia or New Zealand, called Philately. But of course, the McGrady roses go back over several generations, over his roller coaster, and you can also already find most of that info on Help Me Find goes back to Ralph Moore's Stars and Stripes, that goes back to Ferdinand Pichard. So we all go back to that typical red and white stripe breeding line. But a very nice rose that got a lot of attention actually already this summer. It got a couple of awards still under the coat, under the breeder's coat, in several rose trials. For example, a silver medal. Marcus is with us in the audience in Baden-Baden, but also in Belgium, in Kortrijk, it got a gold medal, a certificate first class in The Hague and in the Warsaw rose trials. Pretty harsh climate, very continental. Down there, it got a gold medal as well. So yeah, I think this rose has a good future. It's already here. It's on your continent. It's in trial with Trelaw, and I'm pretty positive they will release it in the future. Anyway, I have to say I'm totally into striped roses. Maybe because I'm also looking for something out of the box and beside the routine. But the German market is pretty shy with releasing too much striped roses. Of course, we have the Dalbar collection, but normally people say, yeah, striped roses, this is something for the South. That's what the people in Italy and Spain and France love, but not so much in Germany. So the Abracadabra rose, that is different from the Abracadabra cut flower rose that some of you might know for the show benches. And that was the reason Trelaw had to change the name here in Australia. They went for It's Magic. So the rose It's Magic is the same we sell in Germany as Abracadabra. And this is the only one in the German assortment, I really regret. So I would love to see some more striped roses in there, because also we get younger people as buyers who might love those roses. Another one I really like is a Grandiflora. Guess it has also been awarded in the national trials here. It's Pink Illusion, released only by Trelaw so far, and a really large flowered rose. And another one only released here in Australia so far is one I totally love, and I'm so glad it got a home. It's called Starburst, and I very much love the fine striping of this rose. And it's actually a great purple violet in combination with yellow. So I think it's a very unique and but very beautiful rose too. And one to come in Germany next year is one that would remind many of you probably of Oranges and Lemons, bred by Sam McGrady. Will be released under the name Lollipop. Lollipop is also a name some people exhibiting might know, but the other Lollipop released by Cordis is a cut flower actually. And since those two markets normally don't overlap and don't collide, we use the names again for a garden rose. But probably if it will be released here in Australia, Trelaw will probably change the name to something else. But I'm looking very much forward. You can see the very clear color combination of yellow and orange, and it's a nicely compact floribunda, and with very healthy foliage as well. So, and what about blue or bluish roses? I have to admit I'm also totally into that. Probably not as much as our dear friends from Japan, because we all know the Japanese people are just crazy for those colors, but I'm totally into that too. I did some early attempts already back in the 90s, and a rose that you know here in Australia as a thank you rose for Transplant Australia. It's one of those that is also named the Vodacom Rose in South Africa or Plum Perfect in the US. But I put more effort in those breeding lines a little in the early 2000s. And so let me introduce to you what I like to call the class of 2004, because I recognize somehow that some great roses that ended up on the market I created in 2004. One of those is the rose we saw already. It's known as Novalis here, also the same name in Germany, but known as Poseidon in the US. Another one only released in Japan so far is Kinda Blue. Very nice rose, pretty good disease resistance. We will see if it will other markets will be interested as well. And actually a sister seedling, all of you who have been to the botanical garden saw, is a rose called Quicksilver. This is a climber. And I think it's the only climber in that color really existing with large flowers like that. Unfortunately, it's not doing well for us in Northern Europe. So for us, I tried it again and again and again, because also our salespeople would love to have a rose like that. But it stays in our northern German climate, it stays a skinny shrub like this. Not really attractive. But when you bring it to regions with warmer climate and longer season, you definitely get a great climber from it. So it was first released in the US, and then it moved over here to Australia. In Europe, I have been asked by a lady a while ago, by a lady from the US actually, who know it, who was living in Italy. And she said, why can't we buy it in Europe? And I said, yeah, maybe in Italy that rose would work for you. So if I have the next chance, you know, we are still cooperating with Barney Roses in Tuscany. So I sent some budwood up to Barney. And 3 years later, what's the price? I got a message back from my dear friend Beatrice. And she said, oh, wow, this lavender climber is doing so well for us. So in Europe, you can definitely get it from Barney. But I will not recommend it to grow it up further north. The rose is just not happy there. And one last one from that year is a rose known under the name Lavender Flower Circus, or in the US, many people know it as Lavender Veranda. But of course, I haven't stopped in 2004 breeding for those types. Another one released in Germany is Nautica, called Proll with Keisei roses in Japan. And another one really known, well known and popular here in Australia is Tangles. Not released in Europe yet. Tangles was a whale that showed up at the coast at Portland, where Treloar is, and what became a kind of a tourist attraction there. And because of kind of unique patterns on the back of the whale, they nicknamed it Tangles. And so it became a name for this rose too. Our Japanese friends know as Matinee. And pretty brand new is this tiny little one, miniature or patio rose, recently awarded in the national trials here in Adelaide, that is now released by Treloar as My Little Angel. Great name, and I guess I somehow need to bring this rose back home since we lost it, and it must be something. So I'm trying to smuggle it out here, but you all don't talk about it. Anyway. So you think that was all pretty usual until now, you as Rosarians. Yes, I agree. So let's talk about some really unusual stuff. You have probably no idea how many abnormal, weird, crazy seedlings a rose breeder gets to see on the benches. You know, I'm starting every year with around 200,000 seedlings, and there's really a lot of crazy stuff you get to see. Some you keep, but you can't keep it all. Working for a breeding house like Cordis, supplying the mass market, you know, we're not supplying Rosarians only, we are supplying the mass market, means to please ideas, taste, and cliches of the crowd. So talking rock music language means you play mainstream, not indie, you know. Going for the unusual might be exciting for everyone bored by daily routine. That can be me, the breeder, but also the marketing department and the sales department. But it's kind of risky and might fail even you put an extra promotion effort behind. Many of us had to learn that lesson. that what sells in the end is a rose that looks like a rose. And selling roses is what pays our bills, sorry. So sorry for guiding you into the cruel world of commerce. Let's watch some examples. My dear colleagues of Star Roses and Plants, our agency in the US, also agency for much longer for Mayon roses, they gave me permission to show you this rose collection they called a couple of years ago the look-alike roses. And you can see, I can almost imagine the marketing department sitting there and stretching their brains, you know, and coming up with those funny names, Apple Dapple, Bougainvillea, Hydrangelas, and Floxy Baby, you know. And I have to say, this is a couple of years ago, and the truth is it totally failed. They withdrew it from the market after a short while. It didn't work at all. So the lesson was that people don't want some roses that look like something else. They want a rose that looks like a rose. Maybe these days, with more people going more for insect-friendly roses, it might be different. But at least 5 or 7 years ago, I don't know how long ago it was actually, it didn't work at all. Another group some of you might have heard about or had experience with, I kindly got permission. I will not judge them at all. I got kind of permission of our dear colleagues of Interplant Roses from the Netherlands. This is what is called the ruffle roses. You see they have this funny breeding line. This is only a few examples. There's more in the group of the ruffle roses. Yeah, they look like a dahlia or like a peonia or whatever, but they don't look like a rose. I truly have no idea how well they sell, but at least this is pretty weird, and I think a lot of average people wouldn't identify those flowers as a rose flower at all. And not too long before I departed for Adelaide, my dear friend Chris, you know, we are changing message all the time, you know, and sending photos of each other's seedlings. And he came with with this new breeding line, and he says, yeah, look at what funny stuff I get. And he said they are actually pretty healthy, but the next sentence in his email was, but will it sell? That's always a concern we have. So, honestly say, I don't care much about your opinion, because you're a bunch of crazy Rosarians. Sorry, don't misunderstand. I'm from your tribe. Yeah, no problem. But the question is, will the mass market like this? You know, and Chris is wondering about, but I think he is probably too curious to find out. I think we will see some of that stuff on the market soon, somehow. You know, nothing released yet, but I think it's funny, nice-looking roses. Another one, a pretty similar example. I remember actually I joined the Warsaw Rose Trials, and I found my dear breeder colleague and friend Martin Fisses standing in front of his rose, a big bush kind of shrub, ground cover rose, with those funny propeller type flowers. It's actually tiny flowers. And he was standing in front of it, and I went to him and said, hey, what's going on? Do you like what you see? What are your babies doing? And he said, yeah, I'm just wondering, this rose gets one award after the other, and looks like those crazy Rosarians here in the jury, they like it, but I'm really wondering that will do well on the market. He put it on the market anyway. It's called Palsy Welzy, and we will see if it gets great sales. But this is a typical situation where breeders are in. We love that crazy stuff as well. And of course, we like when they get awards. But that's not the end of the story. In the end, they have to sell. This is one of mine I got a couple of years ago. What does it remind you of? Looks a little like, yes, you're right, an artichoke. Yeah. So we called this rose always, during the testing, we called it the artichoke rose. Yeah. And finally, the artichoke rose became Mon Petit Chou. And those of you who know a little French, or a little more French, might know that might translate into my little cabbage. But it's actually a nickname amongst lovers. in France, you know. That's how lovers address each other, you know. So we found that a pretty great idea. We liked the rose. It was special. It's actually a kind of grandiflora. It grows upright, stiff, has pretty healthy foliage, a little fragrance, small clusters, you know, with that dominating, strong, roundish flower in the center and side buds around. And then with that great naming idea, we found that really that should be a rose, but it didn't sell. So we took it from the market after a couple of years. So it's probably not what the average people think a rose should look like. It shouldn't look like a cabbage or an artichoke. So it should look more like a rose. So that thing failed. Might be still around somewhere. You might see it, but it's not officially on the market anymore. Yeah, our lesson. Yeah, and that is another one of mine. That's actually a pretty mature plant in our trials. And if you walk along from a distance, you say, oh, wow, there's a hydrangea blooming. Or maybe it's an azalea. No, but it's June. It can't be an azalea. So what is it? So you go closer and you see, oh, wow, it's a rose. You know, you see those huge roundish clusters, you know, of those nice open flowers. And we always liked it, you know. It keeps the color well. It keeps the clusters forever. So it's a rose, as you can see, bred back in 2010, and we called it Rotensia. This is actually because the German word for hydrangea is Hortensia in German. So that was just our nickname for it. But then I think last year we said, yes, the mature plant looks nice. But in the end, what we have to sell is smaller plants in containers. And those smaller plants in containers are far away from being so attractive. So we said, no, it's probably nothing we need to put on the market. It's too difficult and too special. And this is a rose the world doesn't need. But then 2022 took place. And the rose trials started. And I've put it in some of the rose trials. And this is one of the earlier rose trials in Europe is Kortrijk in the north of Belgium. And it got the golden rose. Okay, you get the message, you get the message from someone, oh, you won the golden rose. And I said, what is it? Yeah, whatever, kind of a funny code, you know. Okay, I said it's 1074 60 5602. Ah, okay, that one. Okay, yeah, but again, bunch of crazy rosarians, who cares? Yeah. So, but then a little later, the Hague trials in the Netherlands. Yeah, and you can see certificate first class for KO 1074 56. Okay, that one again. Okay, yeah, they like it as well. And then we traveled to Warsaw rose trials, and one more time a silver medal for the same rose, and you really start wondering. Yeah? And the European trial season pretty much ends up again in Belgium with another trial we have seen in Danielle's presentation. This is in the French part, further down in the south. This is L'Heureux. And there you see me. I went there one more time, gold medal for park and shrub roses for KO 10. Okay. And then you really start wondering, is it only again and again a bunch of crazy rosarians, or do the people really like it? Because there are also normal people in the juries, yeah, not only rose freaks. So we might to rethink if the rose is worth to be released. We will see. We haven't decided yet, but it's still in the ideas. Anyway, and another thing I would like to show you is what I like to call the freckles breeding line. And I was, maybe some of you remember in one of the earlier versions of the program, Jacques Mouchotte, the former breeder for Mayon, was still supposed to talk to us. And I was actually looking forward to that because I wanted to challenge him to tell us how he actually got the freckles into this breeding line, because this rose, Key Royale, was bred by him. Climber, one flowering climber that was released in '95. I hope you can see the freckles on the large screen. Actually, I discussed that with Hayden yesterday, and he said definitely there is some McGrady hand-painted roses in the background of Bonica, so probably this might be the way. So I'm not wondering if the freckles actually go back to the hand-painted roses of Sam. But as always, the breeders use each other material, of course, and not to end up in your own genetics only. So Tento used the Curial rose pretty much and improved it. Actually got camelot from it. It's still vigorous climber, but reblooming one released in 2011. And quite recently, my dear colleague Jens had another one from that breeding line. It's a shorter version, actually, more a shrub rose called Lancelot. So this is actually the ones that are on the market. But not too long ago, my dear friend David Kenny from Ireland, you know, he's also always posting photos of his crazy seedlings. The breeders love to do that, you know. He came with this one. He said, look what I got from Camelot. And it's a more orangey salmon type, you know, but typically for those freckles line. And it didn't take me more than just 10 minutes to write him back, okay, I have something similar. So this is one of mine, also with a nice orangey, salmony orangey color. So we are all playing around with that stuff too, because we like it. It's kind of exciting. It's new. And another one I would like to show you is a rose we nicknamed Brushy. Some naughty people even call it the toilet brush, but I wouldn't go that far. But it looks a little like. It's not the nicest plant. It's pretty short and kind of scraggy, you know. It's not making a nice uniform bush, so I don't know what to do with it. I'm not sure it would do nice in the garden, but it's a very special cluster that almost looks like a pyramid with some side shoots that also do clusters. Some people say that would be great to cut for table decoration. You just cut 2 of those stems, put it in a vase, and table decoration is done, or your little posy, you know. But in the end, to make money with it, I mean, you can cut it and then you wait 4 weeks to cut the next 3 stems. You want to make money from that? No, I don't know. Anyway, not decided yet what to do with it. The foliage is actually pretty healthy. Definitely a special rose, but I'm not sure that Brushy will ever arrive on the market. But that's stuff we see every day. And another one I would like to show you is a line I got along on the field all the time, breeding ramblers. And this is bud bloomers. In Germany, we have a pretty successful series of heather, of winter heather, that is called the garden girls. And they call them bud bloomers because the flowers actually never open, but they last forever and ever and ever. So when I found this, I thought, okay, let's at least don't throw it away. Because that's, you know, we have to throw away a lot, but I kept them. And you can see, I have a bright red, I have a pink, I have a velvet red, I have a white, I have them all. And I nicknamed them the rose buddies. And yeah, but when we had a visitor visiting a guy, the owner of a pretty big export nursery, he got interested in. And so they are still testing the stuff, and they are maybe about to grow them. And I'm pretty concerned it will fail. I'm not really sure the mass market, the average people, will recognize this as a rose. It might be quite ornamental and look nice, maybe in combination with perennials. I'm not sure. It's actually pretty healthy types, but the flowers are not opening at all. They stay in this stage. Looks nice and colorful, but not sure it will work. I will tell you, when you invite me again for the next convention in Australia, I will tell you if it worked or not. Anyway, this is just a few examples of crazy stuff we get to see all the time. So I could continue and continue, I can tell you. So anyway, this was my idea, telling you a little about what is usual or unusual, and thanks for joining me through this little journey through the last century. So, but what is the goal for the future? What should we go for? Maybe for rainbow roses? So you know how that works, don't you? This is no artificial roses. This is real roses. Yes, they are colored. But look at the single flower. Every single petal has a different color. Yeah. So I didn't know it myself until years ago, until a florist actually told me how that works. Yeah. It's real roses, and this is how you do it. So you take white roses, It's typical varieties like Avalanche or Vandala are used for it, pure white roses. First, you freshly cut the stems, and then you slice the stems into 3 or 4. And every vessel that goes up the stem goes to a different petal. So then you choose whatever number of colors you want to have in the roses. In this example, it's blue, red, and yellow. So you need to slice them stems by 3, and then you put it in the glasses, and the stems suck up the different colors and bring it each to a different petal. And then you end up with a rose that every petal actually has a different color. So it's real roses, artificially colored, but it's still real roses. And so it's one more thing you have learned. And I thank you for listening, and be assured we will keep on searching for the unusual. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you, Thomas. Certainly plenty to choose from, and we'll get people thinking about what's coming and what they might like to order in the future. And certainly some of those roses we'll look forward to having in Australia.
Okay.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you very much.
So we'll break for morning tea now. Just a little thing, if anyone would like to pay their friends renewal, I will be in the breakout room, so you can come and see me and pay for your friends. Thank you very much.